Come on in, have a seat. Everybody isn't going to be in here, so we're going to try and like scoot close, so you're not too spread out. And hey, Opie, I promise to sit here. So if you just want to if you want to set this and just grab a chair, are we live online again? Sweet. Hey, if you're online watching this, welcome back. So, hey guys, come. Oh, that's really loud. Come up a little closer because there's going to be fewer of us without the junior hires. All right, we've got junior, senior guys. We have freshman, sophomore girls. We have freshman, sophomore guys. We just need junior, senior girls, right? Just waiting on junior, senior girls. We're just waiting for the junior, senior girls. They might be here soon, hopefully. All right. Yeah, scoot up. Can you guys fill in that area a little bit? Just you get so far back and the glare and I can't see and it's good to have you. Glad you're here. Man, junior, senior girls arrive and it's like a crowd. A crowd walks in. Glad you're here. All right. So I've got about 3.5 hours of things to say and 30 minutes to say it in. So, you ready? Here we go. Commandment number 1. No other gods. Commandment number 2. Don't bow to idols. Commandment number 3. Don't misuse God's name. Number 4. Honor your parents. Number 5. Oh, no. 4 wasn't honor your parents. 4 is Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. 5. Honor your parents. 6. Don't kill people. Okay. Don't kill people. Don't murder people. All right. Now, we talked about the difference last week. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about this issue that has everything to do with honoring God and everything to do with honoring another person, okay? So, Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. Oh, I didn't go through all my slides here with this. Sorry. I forgot that I'm in control of these now. I don't know whether this is going to work or not. Uh-oh. I may have broken it. Oh, here it goes. Here it goes. We're good. We're good. All right. Here we go. Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. Let's read it together. You must not commit adultery. What in the world is adultery? Well, let me tell you. You ready? Adultery. The unfaithfulness of a married person to the marriage bed, sexual intercourse by a married man with another than his wife, or voluntary sexual intercourse by a married woman with another than her husband. So, basically, adultery is when a married person has sex with someone who is not their spouse. We clear? We good with that? We all understand? I don't know. This is not going to work. I don't know if a staff person wants. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So, now, when I was in high school, I wasn't real worried about adultery. I wasn't real worried about committing adultery. It wasn't like I got up every morning and I was like, all right, Taylor, whatever you do, try and avoid the adultery. Okay, when you go to high school and you walk into biology class, just whatever you do, stay away from adultery. It wasn't something that I had to give a lot of thought. And this is one of those things where this command could be something where on the surface, you look at this definition, okay, a married person having sex with someone who is not their spouse. Okay, any students in here got a spouse? You wish. Okay? So, this can be one. This can be one where on the surface you go, shh. This can be one where you go, all right, I don't need to worry about this. Let's just move on. I don't have to bother with it. Let me ask you this. How many of you play a sport? How many of you do some kind of performing activity, like band or choir or something like that? How many of you... How many of you have taken a test? All right. Now, what is something that you do before you do any of these activities? What do? Right. You study, you practice, you prepare, right? Because it's not about just waiting till you're in the moment, waiting till you're in the situation to go, all right, now's the time to think about this. It's about planning ahead. So when we see you must not commit adultery, guess what? It's going to take some planning. It begins with where you set your heart and your mind right now. High schoolers, are you with me? You must not commit adultery. Get this. You must not commit adultery starts with where your heart and your mind is set now. So all of a sudden, this command of going, hey, When you get married, don't have sex with anybody that's not your spouse. All of a sudden becomes something where it's like, well, wait a minute. No, I should start planning. I should start thinking about this, because where my heart and mind is set now is going to impact my actions later. Now, Paul talked about this in his letter to the Philippian people, where he was reminding them of this. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you've learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. Now, this is true for everything in life pretty much, but don't ever wait until you're in a situation to decide how you're going to handle a situation. Now, you can't predict everything, and so there are going to be times you've got to think quick on your feet in the moment. But good grief, there's going to be enough of that you can't control. These things that you can control, you know are going to come. You know there are going to be temptations. You know there are going to be opportunities in all kinds of ways to live apart from how God is leading you. And so here, what Paul is reminding us is going, look, fix your thoughts, fix your mind on these things now. In high school, what are you thinking about? What are you looking at? What are you considering? How are you viewing people? What you do with that right now matters, because it's time to plan ahead. It's time to make plans for the future, to consider, like, who is the person that I want to be eventually? The person that I want to be eventually is someone whose thoughts are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and worthy of praise. That's the person I want to be. We don't get to just magically be there. So Paul says, fix your thoughts on these things right now, in high school, with the temptations and the pressures that you've got right now. Take the action of fixing your thoughts on those things. So the seventh command of don't commit adultery, something we need to understand is that this command addresses all sexual violations that God has, it addresses all violations of the sexual boundaries that God has set up for his people. Now, I've got to just say this to you. The reality is that if you are not interested in living for Christ, if you're not interested in God's plan and God's purpose and God's call on your life, you can blow this off. This is something where you can be like, nope, I got it. I'm going to manage this all on my own. If you're in a place where you're going, you know what? I want all the help I can get. I want God's will to be done in my life. How many of you want to be happily married? If you're going to be married, you're going to want it to be happily, right? Now, not everybody's going to be married, which is wonderful. That's great. God's plan for everyone is not to be married. And it doesn't mean that, oh, well, the fulfillment of God's plan is if you're married. There are people that God calls not to be married, and God is using them, and he moves in and through their life. So the standard is not marriage. What this is saying is, look, where you fix your thoughts, where you fix your mind matters. And this command to not commit adultery is not just, hey, and so when you're married, don't sleep with somebody who's not your husband. Don't sleep with somebody who's not your wife. It's saying when there is you are not to violate any of the sexual boundaries that God has set up. And remember, this is not so that God can take all our fun away and he doesn't want us to do things that are going to feel good. He's going, look, I have life for you. I have a purpose for you. I have a purpose for your relationships. And if you just go out on I'm going to do what feels good. I'm going to do what everybody says I can do. Man, it's going to mess that up big. Now, last week, we looked at God's command that says you must not murder. And we saw how Jesus messed with that. And it's like, oh, Jesus, you couldn't have just left it alone. Don't murder. Fine, check. I think I can make it through my life probably without committing homicide, right? I'm probably going to be able to avoid not stopping someone's heart, and fine. And we just want to be able to move on. But what Jesus did is Jesus goes, look, it's actually a heart issue. It's actually an issue of anger and hatred. And so while, yeah, it's good to get rid of murder, Jesus would agree, yeah, don't murder. But he wants to get to the root of it and goes, like, you don't just jump to murder. What causes murder? How do you get to murder? The hatred and the anger and the rage that infiltrates our heart does demonic, unspeakable things. And Jesus wants to take care of that. Well, Jesus has something to say about adultery too. And it's going to mess with us because, really? Yeah, okay, don't commit adultery. Check. Watch. Matthew 5:27. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. And everybody went, yep, check. Have you committed adultery? No, me either. We're good, Jesus, right? You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Oh, crud. Well, that's a problem, right? So now Jesus has said, all right, you've heard it said, don't murder. But man, if you have hatred and anger in your heart towards somebody, guilty. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery. Check. Yeah, but if you've looked at a woman with lust in your heart, done deal. Wait, come on, that's ridiculous, right? Now, there's something we should clarify. There is a difference, right, between a glance and a stare, right? Would you agree? There's a difference between a glance and a stare. Now, a glance is, all right, I'm going to acknowledge that you exist. You walked in the room. I can glance. I can recognize, all right, they're here. And then I move on, right? Staring has a more prolonged focus to it, where there's a consideration that happens. There's an evaluation that begins to take place. And a stare can happen in person, where it's just like, right? Or it can happen on a page, on a computer screen, on a phone, on a website. Glance and a stare. And I heard this quote, which I thought was really good. Anyone who stares at a woman in order to fuel sexual desire for her has committed adultery in his heart. It's another way of saying what Jesus was saying, going, look, you've heard it said don't commit adultery, but anyone who stares at a woman in order to fuel sexual desire for her has committed adultery in his heart. Because here's the reality. Glancing at somebody, looking at somebody, and noticing that they're beautiful, noticing that they're handsome, being thankful to God for that creation is going to happen. It's natural. God made us visual, and that's going to happen. So there is an opportunity where there is a glance and you can be like, thank you, Lord. Moving on. It's like a little worship session, right? It's like a little spontaneous worship. Staring to fuel sexual desire is a choice. When a glance becomes a stare, it changes things. Men are guilty of it. Women are guilty of it. I love the imagery where it says, you've heard it said the commandment that you must not commit adultery, but I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I love what Jesus is doing here is he specifically in this moment is addressing men. he's speaking to a crowd, a mixed crowd. It's not just men he's talking to, but it's men he's addressing. And I love this image where he's going, hey, men, I'm talking to you. And in this realm, women are worth protecting. The way you look at them, the way you think about them, what you want to do with them, how you objectify them, matters. It mattered to Jesus. It matters to God. It should matter in our church. It should matter in the lives of all Christ followers. And I love that. Because glancing, looking, noticing, that's natural. That's going to happen. But when you stare, and women are also guilty of staring. It's not like women are like, no, women are free of hormones. Girls never inappropriately admire man beauty. It's not. So this goes for all of us, right? But that stare, when a glance becomes a stare, and you'll know what I'm talking about, right? When you begin to play that movie in your head, you begin to imagine what it would be like to, how you'd like to see them, what you hope they will, and you play that, and it becomes the stare. And sometimes it's that awkward stare, and you've caught people doing it too. It's like you look across the room and somebody walks in the classroom and you see that guy over there and he's like, right? You're like, oh, stop that, right? So the glance and the stare. Now, here we see Jesus take the issue of adultery, which at this point, you as unmarried people aren't needing to worry about, but what Jesus is going, he's going, look, I don't want to just get rid of husbands and wives cheating on each other. We should get rid of that. That's demonic. That's awful. It destroys relationship. That it's evil. It's awful. And God is against it. Jesus hates it, and he wants to get rid of it. But Jesus takes it even more, and we would too, right? We'd be like, all in favor of getting rid of adultery, raise your hand. Yeah, we should. But Jesus wants to get rid of the root, which is lust. Jesus wants to get rid of the stare that objectifies people, that makes people discount or get rid of the reality that this person is created in the image of God, and I'm now going to make them a prop in my movie. I'm now going to make them an object in my life where I can do what I want, where I can make them do what I want. And Jesus goes, I want to get rid of that. I want to get rid of the root of the issue, because you look at it and you go, how does somebody get to adultery? How does that happen? Like when people get married, like there's the vows and there's the love and for somebody to step into that already planning or already involved, there is a demonic and there is a darkness that they have already succumbed to, that they have already given themselves over to. In most cases, people get married and people like, yeah, I plan on being faithful. How do you get to adultery? Because it doesn't just start with adultery. It starts with where you fix your thought. It starts with where you fix your mind. And that starts now. That starts with what you're doing now. And while we would all say, yeah, adultery, cheating is terrible, we would all go, oh yeah, sex trafficking, the use of another person for my pleasure is terrible, and we should get rid of it, and there's all kinds of advocacy groups that are trying, and we should. Jesus is going, yeah, I want to get rid of adultery. I want to get rid of sex trafficking, but I want to get rid of the root of this. And the root of this is lust. The root of this is going with whatever feels good to you and whatever you want to do. And now, in your life, now is when you begin forming your ideas of what is acceptable, what you're going to justify, what you're going to say is okay, what you're going to decide is no big deal. And we do this a lot. So we can go, adultery, bad, right? Get rid of it. Sex trafficking, bad. We should get rid of it. Pornography. Well, hold on a minute. And this, I'm glad many of you are like, bad, yeah, bad. But this is where it begins to be like, nobody gets hurt. Nobody knows. If they're willing, if it's something that they're, and this is where the justification starts to happen. And I've actually had conversations with people that go, there's nothing wrong with pornography. Women are empowered through pornography. And they've bought into this lie. They've bought into this lie that sexual relationships, sexual boundaries, things that God has established for our lives can be altered, can be done away with. And we begin going, you know what, but if it feels good, I should be able to do it. If I like it, then I should be able to have it. As long as I determine that it's no big deal, or as long as I determine that nobody's getting hurt, then and the justification begins. And then we move into, sex outside of marriage. How many of you know somebody who lives with somebody that they're not married to? Most of us do. Because we love each other. Oh, it's fine. It's just a ceremony. And there's all kinds of here's why I bring this up. Your mindset on these things is being formed now. Right now, you're deciding what you're going to justify, what you're going to explain away, what you're going to say is really not all that big a deal. But the reality is that God has a plan. And sex is good, right? Sex is good the way God designed it. Sex is good the way God designed it. But outside of that, it's a distortion. Outside of that, it becomes, I can make sex better. I can have a relationship on my terms that I want. And all of those justifications, all of those ideas are being formed and shaped in your heart right now. You are facing friends, people around you at school, things that you see on television, in movies, where they're lowering the idea of what sex is to where sex can just be casual, sex can just be recreational, sex, it doesn't matter, as long as you want it, as long as it's consensual, as long as nobody gets hurt, fine, just go for it. And it's a distortion of God's plan. The sex that God calls for, the boundaries that God has set up, is for a husband and wife. Sex within marriage between a husband and a wife. And anything outside of that is a distortion. Is humanity going, I think we can do it better. I think that we can be happier this way. And so we begin to compromise. And we begin to say, yeah, it's all about what I want. It's about what I'm feeling. And all the way back on page 1 and 2 of your Bible, it says that God created people. God created man in his image. Male and female, he created them. And he created them to leave their father and mother and come together in one flesh. God designed sex to happen. Male and female, he created them, gave them all the parts, gave them all the desire to come together and to be unified sexually. Anything outside of that is a distortion. And is humanity going, no, we're going to do it our way. And we're going to search for love, and we're going to compromise. We're going to say that, oh, no, sex can be just for somebody, as long as you love each other. As long as you're mature enough. As long as you're both in agreement, well then, that's all it takes. And God goes, no. And where you set your mind on these things is being shaped right now. And it's being shaped by the entertainment that you watch. It's being shaped by the people that you're with. It's being shaped by our culture. And it's getting harder and harder to tell what is right and wrong. God put limits on sex for all of us. For married people, for single people, for teenagers. Because he loves you. It wasn't to take away your fun. It's not because he didn't think of it. It's not because he hates any. He's going, look, this is my plan. This is my design. And his command is don't distort it. Because when you start to distort it, it leads to all kinds of things that are not going to lead to life. You're not going to be blessed. You're not going to receive the life that God desires for you to have in your relationships. And the question that you've got to wrestle with starting now is, are you living to please God or are you living to please yourself? If you're living to please yourself, all right, go for it. But we don't get to turn around and be like, oh, see, and God should be fine with it. Are you living to please God or are you living to please yourself? And we start to ask questions like, so in my dating relationship, I'll talk to you as high schoolers. So as you start dating, one of the questions that high schoolers love to ask is, well, okay, there are limits, but how far is too far? How far is too far is the wrong question. Because it will always lead you to the answer of just a little further. How far is too far means you are focused on, I want to get as close to being outside of God's will as I can and still get away with it. God's not going to honor that. It's not going to lead you to life. And yet in our culture, we are told justify, rationalize, do what you want to do, it's fine. But it comes to this in a really practical way when we're talking about, like, don't commit adultery. Well, I don't have a spouse. Okay, I got it. When you are watching a movie and something sexual comes on, or when you see somebody and you like what you see, and you think about what you see, you think about what else you'd like to see, you think about what you would like to do once you've seen what else you'd like to see, and you think about that for a while. Or when you start dating and girlfriend seems to be okay with it, boyfriend seems to be okay with it, we'll just keep going. Here is what we should consider. Should I be doing this? Should I be looking at this? Should I be thinking about this? Should I be touching this or going here with this person? Should I be doing this with somebody else's wife? With somebody else's husband? Because if you are not married, they're not yours. Oh, come on, it's just, and we can rationalize it and we can justify it, but the reality of it is you don't have any business doing this stuff or looking or touching or whatever, thinking about somebody else's wife, about somebody else's husband. Because it's not just a matter of our actions. Our thoughts are important too. And we're not called to just avoid the bad stuff. We're called to pursue good. You get that? Don't just avoid having sex. Pursue God. Pursue God's purpose in God's life and God's call on your life. It's not just about avoiding bad. But when we open ourselves up to the world, Paul told the Christians in Rome, look, don't copy the behavior of the people around you. Let God shape your thinking. Exit 83 high schoolers, this needs to be a place where we let God change the way we think. Because we live in a world that says, oh yeah, anybody's preference, anybody's style, anybody's desires, as long as it's good for you, go for it. And it won't lead to life. And we are called to love people no matter what. We are called to point them to truth. We are called to be accountable to one another so that we don't fall for the lies and the manipulations and the justifications that we want to do, so that we can do what we want. We are called to fix our minds on the things of God. See, you must not commit adultery. Man, how do you get to adultery? That seems, especially in high school, that seems so futuristic, so far off. Right now, I've been married 23 years, and it seems like adultery? How do you get there? Here's how you get there. Well, it's not that big a deal. I'm just looking. I'm just watching. I'm just thinking. I'm just fantasizing. It's just a movie. It's just a website. It's not real people. It's fine. Nobody's getting hurt. And we come to all these justifications. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Some of you, you are so deep into sexual dysfunction through porn, through dating relationships, where you have convinced yourself that, hey, this is fine. This is love. Nobody's getting hurt. And your consideration of sex is so far from what God has designed for you and what God has called you. He wants your sex life to be amazing in marriage, which is the only place, and we don't have time for this, but he wants that for you. We are only going to get the fulfillment of God's life when we are willing to allow him to lead us into that life. And yeah, he has set up boundaries, and yeah, it means that we are going to have to restrict and not follow our desires and follow the things that everybody else says is fine. It's, yeah, it's good as long as you're in love, as long as you... And God would say, you must not commit adultery. Jesus goes, guess what? It's actually a heart issue, and if your heart is in a place where you're looking at somebody and your desire is to use them, it's the same as adultery. So don't go patting yourself on the back thinking that you're all virtuous because you haven't gone out and slept with your girlfriend or raped somebody or fulfilled some physical act. Jesus says it's a heart issue. And where your heart goes is being shaped right now. So while adultery seems like a lifetime or a different setting, it's beginning to be shaped right now. What are you looking at? What are you doing? How are you looking at the people around you created in the image of God? How are you distorting things? How are you believing distortions in order to do what everybody else says is fine? Are you willing to follow God? Would you bow your head? One of the things, when it comes to, again, how do you get to adultery? And that seems so out there, like murder. How do you get to murder? One of the things that is a primary factor in adultery, in cheating and affairs, is people try and resist it or manage their thoughts and actions all by themselves. Oh no, I can handle it. I can stop watching porn anytime I want. Oh, I can stop sleeping with my boyfriend anytime I want. I don't need to watch those movies. I don't need to. And you've convinced yourself that you can do this on your own. And like many other things in life, you need accountability. So I want to encourage you, find some people around you to hold you accountable, who are willing to ask you some potentially embarrassing questions about your activities, about what you're doing, how you're thinking. You need some accountability with people around you, people that are in your life. Those may be detour group leaders, maybe friends. But you can't do this alone. You can't do this by yourself. So God, I pray that you would send those people to us, but that we would also seek those people out. God, I pray for those who are here tonight that are really broken when it comes to their thoughts on intimacy and sexuality and how you've made them. God, I pray that you would remind them of your love and your presence and your desire for them to have life and to have it fully. So I pray that you would convict our heart when we start to wander and we start to distort what we want love to be and sex to be, and that we would commit to you that we're going to live according to your boundaries. We're going to live according to what you call us to. And we would recognize that all that starts right now, and that we would fix our minds on what is true and noble and right and pure and lovely and excellent and worthy of praise. That we would live for you in Jesus' name. Amen. If you need to talk, if you want to share where you're at right now, we are around. We'd love to do that with you. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and see you on Sunday. If you are